Hi everybody, this is a great turnout. Can everybody hear me in the back? Okay, I might have to like stop and drink water, but I'm usually pretty loud, so I'll just keep being loud. Okay, so if you don't have a handout right now, we are printing up more. So everybody should have a handout. So in this handout, there's basically the ingredients, the supplies, and the directions for everything that we're going to be making today. The video will also be up on YouTube if you need to come back and re-watch me do something. And then we'll also have time for question and answer at the end. So if anything isn't clear, if you can save your questions until the end, we'll have plenty of time to go over any questions you might have. All right. So first I'm going to just start with sort of my basic approach today. What I really like to practice is kitchen herbalism. I like people to use the things that they already have on hand and use them for their own wellness. So if you think about it, you already have a great herbal supply closet in your spice cabinet. All the spices that we use from, black pepper to salt to coffee, I'm going to use those today, as well as telling you about some of their properties. But basically what I have on the first page for you is sort of my top 25 list of herbs and spices. So if you're going to have a well-stocked spice cabinet and you're going to be using spices in your home as medicine and using food as medicine, these are sort of my top 25. So some of them you might already have, some of them might be a little less familiar, but these are generally the things that would be great for you to have on hand if you're making your own at-home preparations. Whenever possible, I really like to encourage people to buy whole spices. They keep longer, they stay fresher, and then just grind them as you use them. So rather than buying pre-ground black pepper, get some peppercorns, get a pepper mill and grind them as you use them. And the reason I encourage people to do that is they stay more active. So the fresher the herb, the more freshly ground, the more active it is, the more health benefits it has. So in the case of something that's pre-ground, it might not be going bad, but it's sort of losing its potency. It's going to be less strong over time. So as soon as it's ground, it starts to lose some of its shelf life. Think of it that way. I also like to just keep basic flavorings and extracts on hand. Some of those can go into the preparations we're making today. I listed vanilla extract, peppermint extract, almond extract, and lemon extract. Those are ones that you can add to your at-home products. You don't have to go out necessarily and buy a whole new batch of expensive essential oils, even though those are really great. You can still just use regular culinary extracts. They're really similar to essential oils, but they're not made the same way and they're less strong, which also means they're more safe. So think of it that way. You get a little less strength, but a little more safety. Dry herbs that, if you're thinking of starting to have dry herbs in your home, you already have your spice cabinet, maybe your spice cabinet's fully stocked. I picked sort of the top 5 herbs that are easy to use. They have a lot of applications, and they just make the most sense if you're going to start buying bulk herbs. So one of the main herbs is lavender. Grows here in the Pacific Northwest, great to have on hand. A relaxing herb, and we're going to use it in several of the preparations today. That's one of them. I also listed calendula, so that's marigold. We should have some of these also available in our dispensary. Chamomile, good old chamomile. Okay. I also listed hibiscus, which if you haven't seen it before, is these beautiful dried hibiscus flowers. And so I chose these because they have a wide range of applications and they're generally safe to use. If you're just starting out with herbs, it's best to start with the ones that are safe. Then you're not worried about taking too much or causing anybody harm by using them, especially if you're new to using them. Okay. As far as gift making goes, it's really fun to get different labels. I just saw some really pretty craft paper labels, brown labels. You can use those to label your products. So as long as you're making something, you're going to want to make sure that you have a label on it. It's going to tell you what's in it, when you made it, when you should use it, and maybe if it turned out to be any good or not. You can always write that on the label. Remind yourself. I also listed just the basic kitchen supplies. I'm going to be using most of them today. The sort of most important one that I'll mention for making things like balms and salves is the good old Pyrex glass measuring cup. So you can use a double boiler for any of the things that I'm going to go over, but this glass measuring cup is really handy to have on hand. Okay, so instant double boiler. All right. I will mention sort of our first project, and I'll just kind of pass these out. This is a fun idea because we're talking about the spice cabinet. I'll just kind of pass one back. This is just a glass jar. There's a magnet inside the metal lid if you want to just pass it back and people can take a look. There's a fun brown label. And then these stick directly to the fridge. So they stay up there. So you can. And I got a whole set, and so I just thought of every herb I could possibly want. You can get a batch of 24 or 25 jars, make the labels for the list of spices I gave you right there. And it's a great gift for somebody. You can give them a metal tray, like a really nice cookie sheet or something, if they don't have an easy place to stick it. But my fridge happens to be right next to my stove, so I have all my spices stuck to my fridge, and I can just grab them as I'm cooking. Really easy. So yeah, take a look. And they look really pretty. When they're stuck on the fridge, you can see inside and see what you have. But I might want to use some of those spices in a little bit, so make sure they come back. Okay. So let's start with our first project. Let's talk about Gourmet Infused Oils. So I'm sure you've seen these at the store, especially around the holidays. They're really pretty, they're really colorful, but a lot of them still have things like preservatives and not necessarily things that you want. They use lower quality oils. Some of them use soy oil or corn oil. So if you're going to make your own infused oils or oils to give as gifts, you can control everything that goes into them. You can control the quality and you can control the taste. And I think that you get a better product with that. So one of my mottos is you can never have too many glass jars. I start kind of collecting them around this time of year. So a nice tall glass jar works really well for this project. I've listed herbs and spices. Generally, picking about 3 is a good rule. So any of the ones on those lists will infuse into an oil. Not every herb does a really good job of releasing into an oil. So some spices and herbs are better than others for making an oil. And then I have a list of oils to actually choose from. So I listed my favorites. Avocado oil, if you haven't used that before, it's really not that hard to find. It was harder to find, but I haven't had trouble finding it. Avocado oil has a really high smoke point, and so it's really good for quickly frying or sautéing. So it's really superior for that. Olive oil can kind of change flavor at a high temperature. So olive oil is better for things like salad dressings and things that you're not going to be heating up a lot. Sesame oil is another really high temperature oil. That's great for stir frying. Coconut oil is too. And walnut oil is one that I've also started using. It has a really high level of omega-3s, those beneficial fats, but it doesn't do as well with heating. So again, that's more like a salad oil. So this would be sort of if you're making an oil for salad dressings. I will say that for this method, you want the oils that are liquid at room temperature would be best. If you're just going to be doing a method where you just pour it in the bottle and kind of set it somewhere and forget about it. If you're going to be using coconut oil, I have a different method listed on here, and that would be the alternate method listed. So that's when you would combine the oil in a crock pot or let it kind of cook at a very low temperature at 100 degrees. So coconut oil you would have to cook to do the infusion, but for any of the room temperature, the oils that are liquid at room temperature, you can just set it and forget about it. Okay, so this one's pretty straightforward. I'm going to use just sort of the pretty standby herbs. Rosemary I think looks really great in an infused oil. Keep in mind that you might want to get the herbs back out again when you do this, so try not to really force anything in. They should be okay to come back out. Here's some sage. So I'm going to do some sage. And then for this one, I'm going to kind of so our next project is going to be a mussel oil or muscle rub oil. So I kind of made this one already. So I'm going to kind of do the same thing. For this, I'm going to put in some ginger. Okay, so we're just going to kind of stuff some pieces of whole ginger in here. And remember, we're doing kitchen herbalism, so it doesn't really have to be precise. It just has to fit in the bottle. Okay, so I'm going to do some ginger too. I'm thinking all about herbs that are warming. I want to make a warming muscle rub, and the base of that muscle rub is going to be an oil. So I'm going to make my infused oil. And I might have handed it out. Okay. And then I'm also going to do a little bit of cinnamon. Okay. Just keeping with that same warming trend. Okay. And it already looks pretty, if everyone can see it up here. You can see the herbs. And then the next step is really, really easy. Even though I spilled. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so this was extra virgin olive oil, thank you. And of course, do this on your kitchen counter so you don't spill everywhere like me, but that's sort of how I do things. Okay. All right, so the next step after you fill it with oil is you're going to actually put this somewhere out of the light that's warm. So what I normally do is put this into a tall lunch bag, a paper lunch bag does the trick, and then either set it on a sunny windowsill or put it somewhere warm. Over the stove is generally a warm spot, sort of over the vent hood. Some people put this in sort of near their water heater. Don't set it on your water heater, but whatever spot in your house that stays warm. I know with the Pacific Northwest being what it is, we have a lot of cold and damp, so find that spot and stick to it. Okay, so this needs to actually stay somewhere out of the light for somewhere around 10 days. You can do 7 to 10 days. It doesn't have to be a full 10 days. But just think that you want to actually plan your gift making in advance so that you have time for this oil to sit and for it to become flavorful and useful. I gave you some examples of combinations. You can use like red pepper and garlic and sesame oil. So that would be someone, maybe they really like to cook Asian style or they'd like to try a new style of cooking. Rosemary, sage, oregano, basil, and garlic. That would work well for somebody who likes to cook Italian style. Black pepper, garlic, and bay leaf and coconut oil. That would be great for something like Thai cuisine. Calendula and lavender, oops, left that out. Calendula and lavender and avocado oil. That would be another base to make cosmetics or to make a salve or a skin healing cream. Rosemary, red pepper flakes, sage, and lavender and avocado oil is sort of the base that I made for the muscle rub that I'm going to be demonstrating today. Okay. So the last note that I'll put on there is you can use garlic powder in your infused oil, but please avoid using fresh garlic. The risk is botulism. And if you've heard of botulism, that's not something you want, a foodborne illness that can make you very, very sick. So don't use fresh garlic in an infused oil. If you see if you see garlic oil or infused garlic oil on the shelf, they've usually added an acid, which is a preservative, to make sure that botulism isn't a concern. You can make infused garlic oil, but you just have to use it right away. So it's okay to make it fresh. You keep it in the fridge so it doesn't go bad. But then otherwise you would have to just avoid using it. Use garlic powder instead. Okay. So that's our infused oil. Okay. My next project is infused wine. which is even more fun. Okay, so this is the most nondescript bottle of wine I could find. I tore the label off. So it really doesn't matter how good the wine is. In fact, you're going to be adding a bunch of stuff to it, so it's kind of better if it's cheaper, as long as it's tolerable. Don't get a wine that's completely undrinkable. But, you know, $3 chuck, that, you know, sort of bottle of wine. You can do big batches of these. People can get a case of wine and just make infused wine. Let me see, did my spices come back up? My little jars? I know I'm going to need those at some point. Yeah, I have the one stuck to the wall. It's my cinnamon. Okay. So there are different flavor combinations that you would want to use for white wine and for red wine. Red wine, think of mulled wine. Think of spices like cinnamon, like black pepper, like star anise or anise seed. Think of what you would use to make mulled wine. As far as white wine goes, kind of stick with the citrus, ginger, sort of the higher notes in terms of flavor. So for an infused wine, the best part is the first part, when you have a glass. So first start by having a glass of wine, and that way you have room for the things that go in it, or, you know, save the wine for later. So I'm going to put more ginger in this one. You only really need to get rid of a half a cup or a quarter of a cup of wine. So. And just be really generous with what you use as far as fresh things that are going in. Remember, fresh spices are less potent than dry spices. So for fresh spices, you'll need to use more, and for dry spices, you'll need to use less. So I'm going to get a couple pieces of orange peel going here. You can get really fancy and do sort of like long curls of orange peel. So I've got a little orange peel, I've got a little ginger. I've got my whole spice rack with me. Let's see. There's red pepper. Let's check what else. So here I've got a mixture. These are white peppercorns, red peppercorns, and I also have some coriander seed in here. So I'm going to drop some of those in. When you're infusing wine with anything really strong, like either you can do cayenne if you wanted a wine that'd be really good for when you have a cold, for breaking up your congestion. You could put chili in it. Okay, but black pepper you want to be pretty conservative with, so I'm going to use about a teaspoon. Okay. Another great thing to put in red wine is chamomile. Chamomile tastes really great in an infused wine. Okay, so here's this really pretty. Oh, in white, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Put that in there. Okay, and so again, you have another one that looks really pretty on the shelf. This one, after you let it sit, it's nice to strain it out. You could give it like this as a gift and then just say use by whatever date. I mean, you could honestly do this on Christmas Eve and just say, all right, wait a little while to drink it. Okay, and really just getting creative with this. Just keeping in mind the flavor that's already in the wine and kind of following along those flavor profiles will give you something that's much more drinkable. These are great. White wine is great to turn into a spritzer to add a little carbonated water to it. Red wine is great if you wanted to warm that up and you sort of have an instant pre-mulled wine.
What's the minimum time to wait and the maximum?
Minimum to, I would say, at least 2 weeks. Minimum would be a week. It's still pretty, I mean, there's still flavor in it, but 2 weeks is the ideal. And you could leave it in as long as you wanted. The only thing that's going to change is the flavor is going to get a little bit stronger, but it sort of reaches a saturation point. There's sort of a maximum flavor that's going to happen. I've left wine to infuse for 2 months, 3 months before, just to see what happened, and it's still drinkable. It's just pretty strong. I end up having to kind of dilute it with something else. You could add some, untreated, some fresh red wine into something that's been infusing a really long time. Just add plain red wine.
Do you also have to put it in dark place, like the oils?
Yep. Yeah, and you could store it. It doesn't have to necessarily be in a cool environment, like how you would want to store wine for long term. It could just be at room temperature. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be in a special warm place either. So wine is different than oil, especially since what you're infusing is going to be water-based in terms of using wine compared to oil. So oil needs a warmer temperature, wine's fine at room temperature. Good question.
Does it need any special corking? Like once you uncork the bottle with wine, do you have to transfer it into a bottle like this? Or?
I think if you get cheap wine, it has a screw top, and that's really nice. But if you have a wine with a cork, really just put the cork back in, and you can drive the cork pretty far back into the bottle. That's usually just fine. It doesn't matter putting the cork back in at all.
With white wine, do you have to refrigerate it after you open it?
Nope, should be fine. Do you have to refrigerate white wine after you open it? For infusing, for the purposes of infusing, it's just fine. Yeah, if you want to serve it cold, you can serve it cold later. But really, refrigerating wine is more for the flavor and to accentuate the taste and for those purposes than it is for really preserving it. It's pretty well preserved already, so it should be just fine. Okay. The next thing I'll talk about is what's called a fruit shrub. So if you've never heard of a shrub before, it's a non-alcoholic drink, which is great for either friends who are not drinking, or maybe you have a friend who's pregnant, or maybe your friend is a doctor who's on call and you want to have them enjoy the party too. So fruit shrub is vinegar-based. So when you drink it, you can turn it into a mocktail, so it feels fancy. It has a different taste to it. It has a little bite to it. You don't have to just, offer somebody a soda. You can give them something a little bit fancier. So this is a fruit shrub. I made this particular fruit shrub. This is 2 days old. I made it using 6 cups of cranberries, raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries. You can use fresh or frozen, so you can make it, any time of year. Maybe you froze some fruit over the summer and you're not really sure how to use it up. This is a great use for it. So basically get a big bowl, a non-reactive bowl, so a non-metal bowl. Put the fruit in the bowl, pour vinegar over it, and then just kind of let it sit. I put a note on it saying this is going to smell like vinegar, so sorry whoever has to, it's going to make the house maybe smell a little like vinegar while you're letting it sit. You let it sit for 24 to 48 hours. The amount of vinegar you use isn't precise. It's really just enough to cover the fruit, but not so much that the fruit is floating in the vinegar. You just kind of cover over it.
Can you substitute the kind of vinegar?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is sort of the easiest, and it goes really well with fruit because it's already so fruity on its own. I wouldn't necessarily go for white vinegar because it doesn't have much of a flavor profile, but in a pinch you could. Things like champagne vinegar. I wouldn't necessarily use balsamic vinegar either because it's just already so flavorful on its own. It's already been aged in oak, and it would impart a lot more flavor on its own than just the flavor of the fruit. So I'll have this kind of at the end. So I'll have cups for you guys to come up and taste the shrub if you want to try it. Okay. The great way to serve shrub, you can use it just like you'd use a grenadine or another syrup in a cocktail. 1 to 2 tablespoons in the glass, and then fill up the rest with sparkling water, and you have sort of this sparkly cordial. And you'll see this one is a particularly brilliant red color, and that's from the cranberries. So you're using the antioxidants in the fruit. You're getting the color, which is a beneficial part of the fruit. That's why we like to eat colorful foods, foods from all over the rainbow, and the vinegar preparation allows those to get into your drink. So way better than just having a soda on hand to offer somebody. Way more fun. You can use peaches, pears, berries. I wouldn't necessarily use bananas or something that would really just kind of turn it. Yeah, that just doesn't sound good, does it? But citrus is great. I didn't list citrus on there. Lemons, limes, grapefruits, they go great in a shrub. Or serving it too, you can just serve it with a little added lime juice or a lime garnish. That tastes really good. And you can use honey or sugar. I used sugar in this one because it's what I had on hand, but honey you can use in the exact same proportions. Yeah?
How long does it last once you make it?
I keep this in the fridge and it can keep for several weeks. It's already, because it's already so vinegary, and it's because it's a syrup, there's a lot of sugar. The sugar is preserving it as well as the vinegar. So I keep it in the fridge just so I'm not tempting any bugs to let it spoil, but it's already pretty fermented, and then the added sugar is also preservative. Yeah?
Do you have to mash it to a sieve, or can you put it through a blender and make it easier on yourself too? Or do you have to do the whole hard, make it a difficult way of straining out the fruit?
So I did, because you don't want it to be a puree, you want it to be a thin syrup. I just kind of put it through a basic mesh sieve. I put it through a mesh sieve like this one. And so you just tip the fruit out into this and collect the juice. I also strained it a second time before I bottled it. So there's not many seeds or leftover things, especially if you're using something like raspberries. There's just a ton of seeds, and they're not as fun to drink. They don't look as good in the cocktail. But yeah, question?
Can you add herbs to the shrub?
Yeah. So I put in there, I think cardamom is a really great pairing with fruit, just in general. So I think I put about a tablespoon of cardamom, and that seemed like plenty. You put that in at the second stage. So after you strain the fruit, you have the juice and add sugar to it. And that's when you would actually add your herbs. So yeah, you wouldn't necessarily put the cardamom in with the vinegar, though that would be fine. It wouldn't necessarily matter. Yeah.
Is it okay using raw vinegar?
Using raw vinegar is just fine. Yeah. Nope, it should be fine. Yeah, and at the end you cook it when you add sugar. So basically just bringing it all to a boil so that the sugar dissolves.
Is the cardamom powdered?
I used the whole cardamom to just let it infuse because I was just going to strain it back out.
Did you break it open, or?
Yeah, I just put it in like a mortar and pestle and just kind of split it open. And then you just strain it all out at the end. So the actual finished product is totally clear, or at least doesn't have seeds and bits of herbs and things. Okay, so that's the shrub. I don't know, I feel like I've been seeing shrubs everywhere. I go into a place and like, oh, there's a shrub. Oh, well, what's that about? And then it's actually really, really easy to make. You just have to let it sit for 24 to 48 hours. So again, not a day of kind of thing, but all right. The next one I'm going to show you is homemade vanilla extract. So this one is also kind of impressive when you give it as a gift and you show up and you're like, oh, well, I made you this vanilla extract. And people are so used to just automatically buying it at the store, it might not occur to them that, oh, it's actually really simple to make. So let me get out. I have just a couple of vanilla beans. The general ratio that I gave is 3 to 5 vanilla beans, but I'm just going to do this as the demo. So these are vanilla beans from Madagascar. Full disclosure, oh, they smell heavenly. Full disclosure, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Madagascar, so that place is really close to my heart. So I always make sure to buy vanilla from Madagascar, and I'm totally biased. Other places grow vanilla. Their vanilla is wonderful too. Fiji has vanilla, Mexico has vanilla, but I buy vanilla from Madagascar. I have friends who run a vanilla company who used to be Peace Corps volunteers with me, and so I try to buy from them. I know the farmers that they work with, so I'm totally biased. The company is called La Faza. Madagas is another company run by former Peace Corps volunteers from Madagascar, and they also make vanilla, and they sell vanilla beans. So those are two companies that I happen to like. I have no material gain from them. I just appreciate what they do. Oh, Madacasse. Madecasse.
Is that available local?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have Madacasse chocolate bars and things at PCC now, which I thought was really exciting. So.
And same with the Lafaza?
Lafaza is online, and so they come from a co-op of growers. And Lafaza is a great place to get your vanilla because you can get it in bulk and make big batches of vanilla. You can make vanilla sugar, and especially at harvest time, they have great deals. You don't need super top quality beans to make vanilla extract. So all I did was slit the bean down the middle. You can leave a little bit of it connected sort of at the bottom. So it's just split like that. I just split it with a knife. Here's a bottle. I know, I can smell it from here. Where did I go? Closeouts of cooking stores, World Market, reduce, reuse, recycle. I buy things that come in cool bottles and then I use them and then I save the bottle and I use it for something else. So I kind of shop with that in mind.
Greenwood and 145th has a brewery kind of store where you make your own beer and they have all kinds of great bottles.
Yeah, so you can get, these are different ones that have latches. Like this is like a home brewing type of bottle. Yeah, so you can get these nice lids that click and have a rubber stopper. These are really easy because you can reuse these. You can make a shrub and use it up and then make another shrub and keep using the same cool bottle.
There's also a place in Soho called Specialty Bottling. We started going there.
Oh,
And
cool.
They have everything you could ever ask for. And I just put a bunch of those smaller ones for like 50 cents a pop.
Great.
I mean, they're great deals.
That's fantastic.
Specialty Bottling. Really cool.
Yeah, I don't have any particular associations to any company. It's buyer beware at the moment. So the other place I go to for little containers is Zenith Supply. That's over in Roosevelt, and they have everything. So they have beeswax for making salves. They have all kinds of little different containers, little 1 ounce jars, 2 ounce jars. Zenith, Zenith Supply. That's over in Roosevelt. Thanks. Yeah, if you ever can't hear me, just raise your hand and I'll get it. So you can use any kind of alcohol to make vanilla extract. So I'm going to be using Everclear because I have Everclear. That's sort of the ultimate. But for a vanilla extract, I wouldn't even recommend using Everclear. I'm going to do some water and some Everclear. I'm going to do about 50-50. You want something that's around 80 proof. So something that's about 40% alcohol is sort of the best for making vanilla extract. Most vanilla extracts are between 30 and 70% alcohol. So that would be between 60 and 140 proof, if that makes sense. Yeah?
Does the quality of the alcohol matter?
You're going to impart certain flavors to your vanilla extract based on what you use. So even if you start with really cheap vodka, it's going to taste like vanilla, which is great. So you don't have to really spend a whole lot on whatever alcohol you want to make vanilla extract out of. I've seen people just use a bottle of, like a tall bottle of vodka and just, pour off a little bit like we did for the wine and then stuff a bunch of vanilla pods in it, and that makes a great vanilla extract. So I'm going to use part water and part Everclear. Everclear requires, I think, still a special license to get. I use this very, very slowly. So this is 190 proof. So this is 95% alcohol. So we use it for making medicinal preparations because we can very tightly control exactly how much ethanol is in what we're making. I want this to be 55%. Okay, I'll get a graduated cylinder and measure exactly what amount of alcohol I want. So you don't need that. You don't need this. I'm just demonstrating. Rum is really fantastic. Bourbon makes fantastic vanilla extract. Just be aware, there's already some spices and flavors in that already. So it's going to impart whatever flavor is in it already.
Do you have to use allergic to alcohol.
So you could also make it a glycerite. So a glycerite, it would be using glycerin instead of alcohol. That would also work. Yeah. Glycerin's an edible molecule. That would have to be from a specialty supplier like Zenith. You could also find that online from someone like Mountain Rose Herbals. I know you can buy glycerin from them. So that'd be a good place to get it. So I did about 50-50. I've got alcohol and water. It looks fantastic right now, right? It looks exactly like vanilla extract. So this would have to sit, again, like the rest of our preparations. You have to let it sit for a while. It'll develop that nice dark brown vanilla extract color over a couple of weeks. There's no harm in just leaving the vanilla beans in. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to filter it. You could filter it if you wanted to make sure that you didn't get brown specks in whatever you were cooking. Maybe if you're, I don't know, you're making a meringue and you want it to be, say, really white, then you would maybe filter out the little seeds. But otherwise, just leave it like that and just use it teaspoon for teaspoon like you'd use any other vanilla extract. Yeah?
How do you determine the ratio of water to the alcohol?
So based on so if you just start with an alcohol that's 80 proof on the label, pour it straight in. It's totally fine. Otherwise, you kind of go for something, because this is essentially pure alcohol. I did 50-50. I just estimated it. Again, we're doing sort of kitchen herbalism, right? I'm not trying to sell this to anybody. I'm making this for my friend. I'm telling them that I did this with loving intention, and so it's because we're just cooking and we're kind of just making stuff to use for cooking. Yeah.
If it was glycerin, would it be 50-50 mix too?
It doesn't have to be. Yeah, it could be 50%, it could be 100% glycerin. It would be, it would be fine.
Would that be better?
Honestly, you get more out of the vanilla if you use alcohol. So,
Can you keep it in?
but you can use it. This would preserve indefinitely. It's got a high enough content of alcohol that it would be well preserved. So generally, and especially if you just use something like rum and just pour in rum, it should just keep. Yeah, it's great that it wouldn't go bad for about 10 years. That's the lifetime. If you have any like alcohol-based kind of extract, that's the lifetime. 10 years. Okay. All right. So what we have up next, I already showed you sort of this project on the next page, but I just have a list of ideas for you. So, and this is for making for friends and family, maybe somebody that you know who really loves to cook. Again, we're in sort of that whole section of the gifts we're making. Personalized spice blends, I just have them listed. You know, here's the ratio for pumpkin pie spice. You could make a whole cup, you could make a small jar, you could make a big jar, just using the ratios. So, 3 parts this, 1 part that. Just pick whatever your unit of measurement is and go by that. So if you're going to just be doing tablespoons, pumpkin pie spice would be 3 tablespoons cinnamon, 1 tablespoon allspice, 1 tablespoon nutmeg, 1 tablespoon ginger, and that's how you would read that, and just make it whatever size you want to give.
So do you, on your instructions here, do you glue the magnet then into the lid?
The great thing is if you make sure to buy a jar with a metal lid, it doesn't have to be glued. It just stays on its own. So this one doesn't have one. This one has one. Yeah, so there, you can see it. So so that's what's sticking the. I got them online. Yeah. And I wrote down what they're called. They're called rare earth magnets, and you can get them all different thicknesses and all different diameters, whatever you want. You can just find them. This one is about nickel sized. So, and a rare earth magnet will actually be strong enough to hold the whole jar on the fridge. Sometimes. This one's really full. It's kind of heavy. Still a fun project. Okay. All right, so let's get into making our warming muscle rub. So I'm going to turn on my little stove. Okay, So all I have in my pot right now is about an inch and a half of water. And then I have this handy measuring cup. So I'll let that heat up. So what I'm giving you right now is a basic salve recipe. So salves are just a mixture of oil and wax. That wax can be anything you like, and the oil can be anything you like. So the oil that I'm using for my muscle rub, this was one I made the other day with, this is lavender, rosemary, chili, ginger. So that's the one that I'm using today, but I gave you the other recipe in the infused oil section, and you can use that. So this is about 1 cup of oil, this handy jar. Okay. So here's the oil part. I'm going to strain this in. So I have my infused herbs. So again, I had this oil. I just had it sitting in a nice dark place.
For just a couple days.
So this one isn't going to be super strong. I actually did the digestion method with this one. I heated this one. So I did this one with heat to make it go faster. Okay? But otherwise, you'd have this sitting somewhere for a week or two. Okay? So you can still see there's a few herbs in the bottom, but I'm not going to worry about it too much.
Do you use dry herbs on that one?
This one I did use dry herbs. I used some dry and some fresh. And again, I didn't have to use as many herbs in this one. I used sort of like a tablespoon of each one, like a tablespoon of rosemary, a tablespoon of lavender, just because they were already dry, so they're going to be stronger. Okay.
Lavender seems to be in just about everything. What do you use if you're allergic to it?
If you are allergic to lavender and you're okay with mint, I would just substitute mint. Substitute peppermint. That would be another great relaxing thing. Substitute rosemary. They're in the same family of plants. They're related to one another, so you could easily just switch one out for the other. Mint can be a little more stimulating. Lavender tends to be a little relaxing. If you really were going for something that you needed to be relaxing, then I would substitute chamomile, as long as you didn't have allergies to chamomile. So if we're just going to stick in the vein of these really, 5 simple herbs that I gave you to use, that's what I would go with, for sure. Okay. So you can see sort of the color on this one. So that's the color from all the rosemary, from the peppers, this sort of olive green. Different than the bright green that we started with from just the pure olive oil. Okay, and so my stove is super fast. The water doesn't have to be boiling. You can keep it on low heat, so right now it's at about a simmer. Okay, next step is going to be adding the wax. So these are really nice. They come in these little pieces. You can buy beeswax. This is unfiltered beeswax. You can get filtered beeswax. It comes in a block. It also comes in little individual 1-ounce sizes, and those are pretty easy to use. And so I'm just going to chop this really quick. And I'm going to drop it in. So I want about 1 ounce. Okay, so about 1 ounce of beeswax. If you don't want to use beeswax, or maybe your friend is vegan or has an allergy, then you can use soy wax. Soy wax also works really nicely. Or you can use cocoa butter. So I also have cocoa butter. Cocoa butter is great for lip balms. So here's just cocoa butter. Comes in usually a little plastic tub like this. It's another hard wax. Okay. So all I'm going to do is kind of drop this in. One sec. I'm going to use just sort of little pieces. If you have a big block of beeswax, if you don't have little bits and pieces like these, then just use a cheese grater. Shea butter, yes, you can use shea butter, absolutely. Okay. So I'm just going to let that melt. Now, another little note about consistency. So the consistency of your salve is up to you. You get to control how much wax you want to put in so you can tell whether it's going to be something really thick or it's going to be a much more oily salve. So and you can always just test it, add more. It's nice if you reserve a little bit of the oil or you have extra oil on hand, because if you add too much wax, you still need to have some oil. So if you use it all up in the first step, you have to kind of just hope that you did it right. But again, that's pretty much what there is to it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to keep going through. I'm going to kind of let this melt, and then it'll be ready to pour. All I have for that is a salve tin. These are really nice. You can find these online, or we might have some in the dispensary today. And so I'm just going to pour this into the salve tin to let it cool. Okay. So I'm going to let that go. All right, the next project are bath salts. So bath salts are super easy to do. This one is Epsom salt. Epsom salt is a magnesium salt. Magnesium relaxes muscles. So I gave you the amount for a full bath. A full bath is 3 cups of Epsom salt, and then you put in half a cup of baking soda and about half a cup of dried lavender. So I'm just going to pass this around. If you want to just give it a smell, pass it around. So that one's made with lavender. I also put in a little bit of rosemary in that one. So I'll pass that around. If you wanted to use like an essential oil, you mean?
Well, we actually really don't love it. I this year just randomly, and I noticed the dark purple ones are just a little more intense, and I've heard that those are not as good for culinary because they are such a strong flavor.
Mm-hmm.
So like something with that, that you could use for that.
Yeah, you could use it for that. Yeah. If there's stuff, yeah, if you have lavender in your own garden and it's not super pretty looking, if you have some kind of scraggly rosemary, this is a good project for that, because all they're going to be doing is dumping it into a hot bath. So an herbal bath, you want to ask the person, put this in your tub and soak for about 20 minutes. So it's really nice if you're going to be giving this as a gift, make a little tag with all of your instructions on it so that they know exactly how to use it. And this one is enough for 1 bath. 3 cups should be 1 whole bath. Yeah.
Is it a problem going down the drain, the herb, like the lavender?
Yeah, well, do you have like a little, if they have a little thing to catch it?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, just make sure that they're straining the tub. There's the potential for it to clog the drain. If you're more worried about that, I'm going to skip ahead. So I'll just talk about herbal baths. This is one of the nicest things to have on hand to make an herbal bath for a friend. So, like, let's say I want them to have a nice, relaxing chamomile bath. I can take chamomile. I'll fill my little bag. Okay. So for 1 bath, it's about 2 ounces dried or 4 ounces fresh. So this is about 2 ounces of dried herb. So I would give this to my friend. I'd say, happy holidays. Here's an herbal bath for you. Here are the directions. You're going to have them tie this onto the faucet. So this part actually goes on the faucet while the bath is running. So the water runs through the bag. You can even tie it on to the faucet up over the top. And then after the bath is full, tie it off and just throw it in. And they can take a bath with it. You can use it as a scrubber. You can use it to kind of exfoliate. You can put it on different parts of your skin, maybe on their tired shoulders. They could use it on that. Yeah. These bags I found online, and then I had a friend who gave me a bunch too. So they're online.
Paper Zone has mesh bags.
What does?
Not always, but sometimes during the holiday season they do.
What is it?
Yeah, these are nice.
We can't hear the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. She said Paper Zone had these mesh bags. It was where did I get the mesh bags?
They don't have them all the time, just some of the time they have papers on there.
And this is a simple, I'll pass this around. If you or somebody you know knows how to sew, it's like 3 seams and a ribbon. So you could also make this pretty easily on a personal basis. Oh, you've seen them at Joann Fabric too. See, I'm getting so much more information. You guys are teaching me all kinds of cool stuff. Okay. So my salve is almost melted. Not quite there. Does take it a few minutes. We'll be sure to come back to it.
Do you use essential oils in the bath salts?
Uh-huh.
It seems like that would add moisture to it. How long can that sit?
So that's totally fine. Essential oils are another thing that they don't last as long as something like an alcohol preparation, like a tincture. They don't last as long. But if they're well preserved, they should keep a really long time. And then if they're closed in a jar away from heat, away from air, then they'll be totally fine. The main thing that would happen to them is if they got heated, they would change their scent, or if the lid came off, they would evaporate and be lost from the salt solution. So it's not as much of a concern. Yeah, I think kept in a tightly closed jar, you could save those bath salts for a couple years. They would be totally fine. Yeah.
The bath salts that you just passed around, did that have essential oil in it?
I put a drop of rosemary oil in that one too.
It was great.
Okay, good.
More aromatic than just the regular.
Yeah. The longer you leave the lavender in that bath salt jar too, the more strongly it'll smell even better. I put 1. Yeah. 1. Yeah. Essential oils, you can use them to your own taste, but a little goes a really, really long way. So I just used 1. Okay. The next recipe that I have for you is called the Hand Helper. This one is one using coconut oil. So I'm not going to demonstrate it, but I'll just tell you about it. This is going to be the same sort of method that we're using here, but instead of a liquid oil like olive oil, we're using a oil that's solid at room temperature, which is coconut oil. So the coconut oil you're going to cook until it turns bright green, because the calendula flowers, when they've sort of given off their oil-soluble part, are going to turn the coconut oil bright green. So that's sort of how you know it's done, if you're cooking the coconut oil and the calendula together. It's really fun to show a kid, if you have kids at home, to show them like this is how we get an orange flower and white coconut oil, and then we get something bright green. So it's sort of a fun little chemistry project to show children. And then with any hand cream, I really prefer using cocoa butter. Same for lip cream. It just seems to absorb better into the skin. For something like this preparation where I'm using beeswax to make my salve, it's going to just kind of stay put and act almost like a poultice. It's going to keep that salve right in the same place as a muscle rub. So I've got a sore shoulder, the salve is going to stay on my shoulder, versus making a nice hand cream. It'll soak in. I'm not going to touch everything and get it all waxy, and it's better for soaking into the skin. Okay. So this one, you're going to do the same method, cooking the coconut oil, and then it's really nice if you've seen any of those, they're called Go tubes. It's a flexible silicone like travel tube, and you can pour the salve into there, and then you have something squeezable. They can keep it in their purse with them and then just put it on their hands as they need it throughout the day. So I really like putting a hand cream in that. The next one is going to be the Lip Balm, and I think my salve is ready to pour. A note on checking the consistency of your salve. So here you can see it's clear, it's all melted. I can kind of show the front row. There's like a little drop of beeswax in there, but it was all chunks of beeswax, and now it's clear. So you can everyone can see how it's pretty well melted. And this is just a demo. It just all melts together. Yeah, easy. And so then I'm just going to pour this in my salve tin. It won't have much time to cool, but my salve tin is fairly cold. Okay. And then you just set that aside and let it cool. Once it's cool, it's instantly ready to use. Now, if you wanted to add essential oils, if you wanted to put something like rosemary oil or even use something like a peppermint extract, you would add that right now. So it's off the heat, it's already melted. That's when you would actually add extra stuff. Yeah, question?
So if that's gonna be something to make sure our muscles feel better, like after it's done heating, to add something like MSM or something like that to it? Or?
I wouldn't necessarily, just because, I mean, there's all sorts of options, right? You could add vitamin E to these. You could add vitamin C. There's different preparations that you could get more fancy with it. But as far as what we're going for, the herbal actions in here are things that interrupt pain signals, that cause increased circulation. So what we're going for is by using the herbal actions of whatever we've chosen to put into the oil, we don't necessarily need those other things. But they could be applied if somebody had like a separate cream. There's no reason that you couldn't use two salves together. There's no reason not to.
Rosemary, red pepper flakes, sage, and lavender, those are the ones that help with muscle pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then you told us another recipe, lavender, rosemary, ginger, chili, that one's also for muscles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. They're warming herbs. They affect pain signals. So the question was, the recipe that I used for this salve today, the chili, ginger, rosemary, lavender, is that also good? That's another, just a different variation on the recipe that I gave you in your packet. So that one was using sage instead of ginger. Yeah.
If you do drop in some essential oil, like you said, do you have to stir it or just let it hang out?
You can stir it, yeah. I would stir in the essential oil to make sure it's combined. Otherwise, you could just get kind of an oil slick on the top and it wouldn't be as well combined. Yeah.
Could you tell us how much is safe to put in as far as drops of essential oil? Because it's important not to put.
Exactly. So I believe I put it down for a salve, like for this lip balm. Let's see, for 1 cup of oil, it's 60 to 80 drops of essential oils if you're going to be adding a lot of them. That would make like a vapor rub. So I generally use about 30. And that would be for this entire preparation. So that's for 1 cup of oil plus 1 ounce beeswax. 30 to 40, probably 40 max. Okay.
What about for using the peppermint extract? How much of that would you have
For peppermint extract,
on your warming muscle rub? Let's use peppermint extract.
I would do about the same. I would do 30 to 40 drops, or if you want to measure that out, let's see, 30 to 40 drops would be somewhere around 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon. I'm thinking. Yeah, let's convert drops to milliliters and back again. That's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on my lip balm. It's the last one. Can I steal another napkin? Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm crowdsourcing. Okay. So I'm going to let my salve cool further from the stove so that we can all try it. Okay. So I'm just going to start the lip balm so that it can melt while I'm still talking. This one is going to be a lot more wax than the other, but I already have one that's ready to go, so I'll just pass that around as well. So I'm going to be using, for a lip balm, you're going to be using a lot of wax and just a little oil. So I'm going to put my wax in. Doesn't really matter which order I'm doing this. I'm Gonna add a little water since it's all boiling away. Okay. Yeah, don't let your pan go dry while you're talking. All right. So here's my oil that I made for my lip balm. Everyone can see the color on that. So with lip balms, you can add color while you're infusing the oil, while you're letting it sit in your cabinet, or you can adjust the color more closely by adding something for color after, like while it's on the stove. So I did the coloring beforehand. This one is lavender and hibiscus. And then for color, I've made it with annatto, I've used beet powder, but this one's my favorite. This is paprika. You already have it, so use it.
How much of it do you put in there?
This was a tablespoon. So it was 1 tablespoon of paprika and a cup of oil. And it's not spicy, it's not gonna burn your lips. Paprika is from sweet red bell peppers, so that's not a concern, it's not gonna burn you. So this one's gonna be kind of orange. And so you have 1 ounce or 2 of beeswax, you only need about 1/4 cup of the oil. So you could either make a huge batch of lip balm for everybody you know, or you can just save the oil and reuse it. Okay, I'm going to catch the rest. All right.
Oil and then put the wax, or wax and then put the oil?
It's fine either way. They just need to cook together. Good question. Okay. So I'm going to let that all melt. So again, I have the proportions written for you in your recipe. But let's talk about the sugar scrub. The vanilla extract, let's see, so this is about 1/4 cup of sugar scrub, and I used a teaspoon of vanilla.
So I meant for the lip balm.
Oh, for the lip balm? Yeah. It would be like, again, maybe 20 drops. Yeah, 1/4 teaspoon. That was how much vanilla extract to add to a lip balm.
20 drops.
Yeah, 20 drops or 1/4 teaspoon, something like that. Per batch as I've listed it for you, the 1/4 cup oil and the ounce of wax.
Are the ratios the same, rose, lavender, calendula, and hibiscus?
That one, so I made, it was out of a full cup of oil. So I used 1 tablespoon of, you can use 1 tablespoon of each for that, yeah. My oil I made was a little bit different than that one. So here's a sugar scrub I made. Oh, I'm sorry. Question?
Oh, just very quickly, I've never heard of annatto. What is that?
Annatto is what makes Spanish rice yellow.
Oh, okay.
It's a fun spice to play with. Oh, yeah. Cab over here. It's strong. I'm up here getting hit by all of the smells. So here's another one that I made, the sugar scrub. This one is made with whole spices. So this one is made with cinnamon, ginger, allspice, and I did put a teaspoon of vanilla extract in it. It's very strong, so I'm going to put it around with the lid and you can just open it up. Sugar scrubs are great. They don't clog your drain. If you give them to a friend, there's not a concern about clogging the drain because they just dissolve right away.
I see you wrote metal containers, but you have them in glass containers.
Right. Oh, so the metal container point. Thanks for reminding me. If you're going to give somebody something to use in the bath, give it in a metal container. Because the last thing you want is your friend to tell you the story of how they cut their foot. Oh, I love that scrub. Yeah, until I dropped it because it was slick and wet in the shower, and then it broke, and then now I'm on crutches. You know, that's not a good story to hear. So think of it that way. The other one is a salt scrub. So my favorite salt scrub is salt and coffee. Coffee is a fantastic exfoliant. You can actually use it after you've already made coffee from it, which is even better. So you can either throw it on your garden or you can reuse it. I'm going to turn this down. This is almost melted. Okay. So this one is fantastic for firming skin. The caffeine left in the coffee, even in used grounds, is enough to have a skin firming action. So I really love giving coffee scrubs. It's skin firming. I don't like talking about cellulite. Cellulite is normal. We all have cellulite. If you have estrogen, you have cellulite. That's how it's made. But it is really nice for sort of a skin firming toning. The other thing it's really great for is removing product buildup. So after a week of hair, product buildup, hairspray, conditioner, whatever, it's really good for clarifying and makes a really nice scalp scrub. You can use either one. The salt is actually the optional part. So I'm just doing equal parts because it's fun. That's more of a specific thing. I think that would be sort of a more extensive question. Okay, so I have coffee and salt. I did probably 2 parts coffee to 1 part salt since I'm so excited to tell you about it. Okay, so you can use it just like this, or you can add a little bit of almond oil. Here's organic sweet almond oil.
Just regular salt?
Yep. This is actually called, it's the one called real salt is the one that I used. I wouldn't use coarse salt, I would use fine salt. Coarse salt would be a really aggressive scrub, so if somebody really needed some exfoliation really badly. Okay, I'm just kind of stirring it together, you guys saw. And I mean, what I'm showing you is not super exact because I'm showing you kitchen herbalism. I'm mixing it up. It looks kind of like cookie dough before you put anything else besides the sugar and the eggs in the cookie dough. Okay. So I'll pass this one around. This is another strong smell, so I'll pass it with the lid. Okay, so you can just use coffee by itself. You could do coffee plus almond oil. You could add almond extract, so you'd have sort of an amaretto coffee scrub, right? And add salt if you want it. Salt gives a little more exfoliation. Salt can also, it does a better, so the coffee is sort of adding oil, adding nourishment, because the coffee beans have oil, and the salt is sort of the clarifying part. So the salt is optional.
So you don't have to worry about that amount of coffee like dying or anything.
No, so coffee grounds are not going to dye your skin. They're not going to dye your hair. If you wanted to make hair dye out of it, you could do a really strong cold brew and use that as a coffee hair dye. I have done that, but you have to leave it on your head overnight. So a 10-minute shower isn't going to change the color, and actually helps you clean the tub. So at the end.
How long is the shelf life for one of these coffee scrubs because it's moist and whatnot? I've done it, and then I've also had mold grow in it. So
yeah, if the coffee, if you do it without adding the oil, if you just do a dry mix of salt and coffee, that will keep for a very long time. If it's closed up and kept out of air, out of light, away from heat, it'll keep a really long time.
what about what? Like, what about adding the oils to it?
Adding the oils shouldn't make much of a difference, especially if you use almond oil. Almond oil contains a high amount of vitamin E. Vitamin E is a preservative that's used in almost every cosmetic, so it has a natural preservative action. So almond oil is sort of a good way to make sure that you don't get something like mold if, say, the coffee was a little damp or not super well stored. Yeah. So I would use dry, unused. If you're going to be using used grounds, if you want to do a used ground scrub, that's a morning of.
Right.
That's a Sunday morning. I made my coffee and I take it into the shower with me and I do a scrub. It's like a right away kind of thing. Right. Okay. Okay, so that's the salt scrub. I have a whole handout for you. We'd already talked about herbal baths. That's on the next page. So the next page has a list of different herbs that are good for different reasons. I know we're running a little bit short on time. Yeah, if anybody needs to leave at noon, feel free. But these are different actions, so whether you want to relieve itchy skin, loosen tight muscles, promote circulation, and then I have little stars next to the ones that are okay for kids. So keep in mind when we're talking about herbs, this list of herbs is a little more than just sort of the kitchen cupboard herbs that I've talked about so far. But just keep in mind that some are not safe for kids. They're just too strong. And especially in a bath, you're going to be absorbing the active parts of those herbs, which is great. If we need you to absorb herbs, a bath is great for that purpose, but not safe for everybody. Kids are just more sensitive. Okay. I also have a recipe on the next page for shaving balm. And it's just going to be like that same salve recipe that I showed you. I've got my lip balm going. I can show you what it looks like right now. Here's my orange lip balm. Okay, still melting away. Takes a minute. Okay. So I'll pass around this one. Let's just do the lip balm now. I have one that's already done. This is the annatto. I made an annatto lip balm. So it's sort of a yellow or a peach. And this is what your little stick is for. So if you want to scoop out a little part of the lip balm. And then this is a lip balm container. So maybe you've used a chapstick all the way. I have never used a chapstick all the way to the end. I don't know. I think I lose it before that can happen. So this is totally empty in there. I'm going to pour the balm right into this container. Once it solidifies and hardens, then you can just turn it up and use it like any regular lip balm. So you can buy these containers online. I got this one at Zenith. They sell empty lip balm containers for this purpose. Yeah?
If you cleaned out the dregs of the chapstick, theoretically reuse that, or is there an issue with the plastic and the heat? Can you reuse chapstick containers?
Yeah, you could reuse it. Yeah, you could reuse any chapstick container that you already have. That's just fine. Yeah, hot water should be enough to melt that chapstick and clean it out. The other thing that will clean out a chapstick container is alcohol. So if you spill salve somewhere, if you have a tough time getting a jar clean, if a jar has had a lot of oil in it, then if soap doesn't even work, to get wax off, you can use alcohol for it.
Rubbing alcohol or this kind of alcohol?
The last couple recipes that I have are actually for kids. So if you want to give a gift for parents and kids, the first one is the monster spray or anti-monster spray. And that's just a little spritzer of alcohol and lavender in a little bottle like this. So you would just fill up the bottle. You need about an ounce of either vodka. You could use Everclear and that'd be fine. Vodka is fine. The smell will not linger. It will evaporate. So you don't have a room that smells like booze or something. And then you just add lavender essential oil or lavender flowers, and you have a little spritzer. So anti-monster spray it wherever the monsters hide, and the lavender will help kids sleep. The last idea I have is for natural dyes, making like a tie-dye project. So if you were going to use little jars like these, you could bundle these. You could make a nice gift bag with little jars of different dyes. So pick some colors. You could make up a little batch of different plant dyes, and then you have a ready-made tie-dye project. So each of those measurements that I gave there will make 1 quart of dye, either for dyeing Easter eggs. You could save this gift for the springtime, or for dyeing fabric. And you'll just need to add about a tablespoon of vinegar, and that will make the dye stay on whatever you choose to make the dye for. Yeah?
Can you use this dye in homemade candles?
I don't know that it would work as well because these are all water-soluble dyes, so they're not going to do as good of a job dyeing the oil that the candle is made out of, the wax that the candle is made out of. So go from oil-soluble things like the paprika I showed you, for example, would be a good way to dye a candle. Hibiscus is more water-soluble. Paprika is more oil-soluble, for example. Cayenne is more oil-soluble. But really, I would not make a cayenne candle because when you light that, probably everybody's eyes would start watering. Okay. Well, we're at time.